So when I was growing up, I loved demolition derbies. You guys know what these are? This is when a bunch of people get into cars in an arena and smash each other to bits until there is one car left running, and that's the victory. Now, I loved demolition derby because on Saturday mornings there were two things that were staples in my house: wrestling, and demolition derby. Cartoons most of the time, but wrestling and demolition derby were a must. And I loved demolition derby because there was just something, primal about these cars smashing into each other and going all sorts of different directions. It was total chaos. And you could just imagine it. And one day I got the privilege, the blessing, if you will, of getting to go to a real life demolition derby. My father and I made our way to the Colosseum. What an appropriate name for such a venue where these gladiators clashed. And it was there that I saw with my own eyes these cars. Not exactly the kind of cars you might want to drive around town, but cars nonetheless wheeled themselves into this dirt arena. And that's when the noise began. Because I think one of the things that is not required of a demolition derby car is any kind of emissions or noise control. They're the loudest things on the planet. And when they smash into each other, if you've ever been in a car wreck, you can just hear that sound, that bone-crunching sound of steel on steel. You can smell the burning oil. It was total chaos, and I loved it. Now, I know what you're thinking. What in the world does demolition derby have to do with Jesus? And you may be right about that. But in today's gospel, we get this great story from Mark about Jesus being baptized and then compelled to go out into the wilderness where he is tempted by Satan. Where he is tempted, as the prayer for today says, where he is tempted in every way as we are, yet did not sin. He steps into this arena of wilderness, and he faces down whizzing cars and banging metal. You see, because I don't know about you guys, but sometimes my life feels like a demolition derby. Sometimes it feels like I'm just standing in the middle of the arena without a car, with no helmets, vulnerable as all of this carnage happens around me. Maybe you can relate to that in some small form. Life is hard sometimes. Sometimes we step into these arenas and there's no guarantee of what will happen. Cars will crash around us. Our cars will fall apart. We won't be the last ones standing. And Jesus has faced that same thing in the wilderness in this story today. He goes out for 40 days and he faces temptations. The same very temptations, the same assaults of the enemy that you and I face. The hunks of steel that move by us and scare us. The total fear of standing there unprotected and vulnerable. Things done and left undone that make us feel like we're caught in some kind of cosmic demolition derby. But see, there's good news in that story, because Jesus is called and compelled to go out into the wilderness with something to hold him up. He's just experienced his baptism. He's just experienced this amazing and wonderful gift where he is reminded that this is my beloved, my son, in whom I am well pleased. And the reality for each and every one of us is that no matter how bad our demolition derbies may appear, we go out into that arena with the very same voice from our baptisms. This is my son, my daughter, in whom I am well pleased. They are beloved. They are loved beyond anything that they could ever ask or imagine. They are loved, and nothing can take that away from them. They are marked and sealed as Christ's own forever. So no matter what dangers may beset them, no matter how bad it may seem, they are protected by the love of God that is with them always, even in the worst of demolition derbies. I'm convinced that one of the great pieces of this story is that it is so much like our daily lives, that we're called to go out into these wilderness places and experience hard things. Temptations of thinking we can do it alone. Temptations of thinking that there's not enough. Temptations of thinking that we don't mean enough. These are the demons of scarcity and comparison. And they are fought back in our arenas by one simple voice, the voice of compassion, of love that speaks to us and says, "This is my child. This is my precious and beloved child." And no assault of the enemy, no danger, nothing can really, truly get to them. Now, that doesn't mean that you and I will not have demolition derbies in our lives. It doesn't mean that there won't be moments of great vulnerability and even some fear. It means that we go into that scary and dark place with the love of God at our side, going before us, behind us, all around us, protecting us, keeping us from any harm. Now, does that mean we won't be hurt? Does that mean we won't be broken sometimes? Absolutely not. It means we will have the promise and the reassurance of God's love that has been with us every step of the way thus far. The voice that says to me and to you, "This is my beloved. This is my precious child, my son, my daughter." Nothing can take that love away from them. Amen.